Welcome back to Sports
Man,
on
we are
Tap.
all shaking off the rust right
Wow.
now.
It's Sports on Tap's Ohio High School football coverage. This is week 1, so we're getting the
A
rust.
lot of
off
holding,
right
a lot of false starts, a couple of personal
Got
fouls.
some
I'll tell you
interference
what,
there.
I had a fumble, I think, on
Yeah.
the opening drive.
Yeah.
But right now, let's send it over to Sean Duffy. He's covering the Suburban League American Division.
And we're going to start off with the Solon-Aurora game. Aurora, speaking of fumbling the opening drive, Aurora's campaign got
what
off
a
to a
segue.
rocky
Oh,
start.
wow.
When they fumbled their opening kickoff, leading to an almost automatic Solon touchdown. Before you knew it, Solon had put up 22 unanswered points, and the Greenmen found themselves in a hole they just could not dig out of. Adding an additional 14 points in the second half, putting the game pretty much out of reach. Aurora was able to get on the scoreboard with a 1-yard touchdown run by Bubba Arslanian, but unfortunately, Aurora's night ended there. Aurora's road does not get easier. They end up going to Euclid on September 1st for a crucial Week 2 matchup. Moving on, we have Norton coming to Barberton. Barberton kicked off their 2016 campaign with a big home victory. Junior Garrett Turnball caught 2 touchdown passes and had a 35-yard touchdown run for the host Magics in a win over the Panthers. Turnball on the night caught 8 passes for 154 yards and 3 touchdowns. And junior quarterback Zane Reese completed 14 of 28 passes for 236 yards and 3 touchdowns. Barberton will travel to Firestone for their Week 2 matchup. Turning to Copley, heading to Twinsburg. Weston Bridges picked up where he left off last year, boys, rushing for 195 yards and 5 touchdowns on the night.
Jesus.
If they were scoring in Barberton, it went through Weston Bridges. You know what I'm saying? The visiting Indians held off a late game rally by the Tigers, but unfortunately, Weston Bridges was just too much. Jalen Tucker threw for 2 touchdowns for the Tigers, and Copley will end up traveling to not Firestone this week.
Sure they're not playing Firestone?
They are playing Firestone.
Yeah. I have them listed as playing Firestone.
Barberton is actually is at home facing Coventry. Sorry about that, folks. All right. Well,
Moving on.
Rob fumbled. I fumbled. That's what happens.
Fumble-rooski.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have Kent Roosevelt traveling to Cuyahoga Falls, and the big story here is the Black Tigers finally got in the win column for the first time since 2014.
Oh, good for them.
Look at that.
This was a pretty scoreless game right up to the end when the Black Tigers were able to score on a Nathan Vasilotti 32-yard touchdown pass to Tyler Gibson with 4:49 remaining, and a 28-yard touchdown run by Jordan Bosley gave the Tigers their first win again since October 24th, 2014, when they beat Brush. The Rough Riders, unfortunately, did not put up any points in this game and will try to right the ship against Week 2 opponent Stowe, which is a tall order indeed. Next, we have our friend of show, Buckeye, heading into Revere, and this was one of 2 overtime games that Suburban League American teams found themselves in. Revere needed extra time to beat the visiting Buckeye Bucks. Buckeye took a 21-14 lead into halftime, but Revere was able to put up 2 touchdowns in the third quarter to Buckeye's only 1 touchdown. A scoreless fourth quarter forced the game into overtime when Revere's running back Clayton Langdon, who finished the evening with 261 yards on 29 carries, had a touchdown and had 3 touchdown runs. One of them was the game-winning touchdown in overtime, which sealed the game for the Minutemen. Revere will travel to Parma to take on Week 2 opponent Normandy in Week 2, obviously. Next game is our Talmadge versus Ravenna, and Talmadge's Blue Devils won a hard-fought overtime battle at Ravenna to notch their first win of the 2016 season. A close game throughout, Talmadge was able to respond from a Ravenna field goal in overtime with a 16-yard touchdown pass to secure a victory. Talmadge will look to continue their winning ways and welcome Ellett as their home opener for 2016. My spotlight game of the week was also our podcast game of the week, and that was Highland versus Brunswick. This was a very, very interesting game from the beginning. Now, we start off with Highland scoring on a 38-yard touchdown pass from quarterback Matthew Ernst to wide receiver Evan Castellanos. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Brunswick was not able to get their offense going in the first quarter, and the Hornets held a 7-0 lead after one. Early in the second quarter, as my esteemed colleague Josh mentioned, the Devils' offense finally got their first points of the year on a 26-yard field goal from senior Tim Dick.
27.
27.
Oh.
My apologies.
Boom.
It was hard. My vantage point, it looked like 26. It was in between 26
The
and
ball was
27.
on the 10-yard line. It's 7 yards
I'm
from
sorry.
the 10-yard line.
Again, it was when they kicked the field goal and everyone thought I was a Notre Dame scout. I was trying to tell them I wasn't. Now, after the holding the Hornet offense to a 3-and-out on the following possession, Brunswick senior running back Jacob Martin took the ball for a 75-yard touchdown run to put the Blue Devils up 10-7. Highland threatened late in the second quarter, but a stout defensive effort and poor clock management by Highland allowed no points for the Hornets going into halftime. Highland started the second half with the ball and put together an 80-yard touchdown drive, capped off by a 22-yard touchdown pass from Ernst to wide receiver Jake Sir Lewis, giving the Hornets a 14-10 lead in the third quarter. Brunswick defense battled back and forced a fumble late in the third quarter and early into the fourth quarter. I lost my space. Sorry. Following that fumble,
Golly.
the Blue Devils put together a 45-yard touchdown drive, capped off by another touchdown. Senior Jacob Martin, his second of the evening. Brunswick was attempting to salt away the game late in the fourth quarter. However, costly penalties and miscommunication forced Brunswick to give the ball back and gave Highland a chance to win the game. Highland did everything they could to score a winning touchdown, but unfortunately their efforts came up short when, again, the Brunswick defense answered the call and stopped the Highland Hornets from scoring late in the game and returned the ball to them with roughly 30 seconds left in the game, giving the Blue Devils their first win and an all-important revenge game from last year.
Sure did.
Now I'm going to kick it over to my esteemed colleague who covers the national division, and that would be Ed.
I thought I was an esteemed
You're all
colleague.
esteemed. Leave me alone.
Man.
Take a breather.
Yeah, you're all right, dude.
The National Division
Goodness
in
gracious.
the Suburban League.
All right,
With
well,
Ed Dick.
we're going to start out pretty hot here. The Wadsworth Grizzlies pulled a rabbit out of the hat to defeat the Ashland Arrows 27-24 in Ashland Community Stadium. Junior quarterback Joey Bauman hit wide receiver Michael Lalathan for a 42-yard touchdown as time expired, ending Ashland's 17-point run in the second half. Ashland's Bryce Stormer had just connected on a 21-yard field goal with 19 seconds left to give the Arrows a 24-21 lead. Bachman completed 10 of 18 passes for 118 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but also ran 30 times for 265 yards and 2 touchdowns. The rushing carries and totals, both a record for a Wadsworth quarterback. Ashland's Grant Denbo was 27 of 38 passing for 276 yards and 3 touchdowns. Wadsworth will travel to 1-0 Worcester, while Ashland will host 1-0 Clyde. Moving on to Brecksville Broadview Heights, the Bees prevailed over Parma Padua 36-34 as the Bees came up with a stop on a 2-point conversion attempt by the Bruins that would have tied the game. The Bees led the entire game but could not put the Bruins away until the final stop. Brecksville senior and someone we talked a lot about last year, quarterback Luke Sternad threw for 4 touchdowns and rushed for another, with 3 touchdowns going to running back wide receiver Joey McGonagall. Padua quarterback Kevin Peterson, not too shabby himself, hit on 20 of 30 passes for 303 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Padua's Alex Ludwig caught in 9 passes for 187 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Bees of Brecksville Broadview Heights will host 0-1 Garfield Heights, while Padua, in a rivalry game, will battle 1-0 Parma Heights Holy Name. The defending Suburban League National champions Stowe Monroe Falls Bulldogs showed no signs of complacency, defeating the Green Bulldogs 56-41 in a high-scoring back-and-forth affair. The first quarter and the first half ended in 7-7 and 21-21 ties, respectively. However, Stowe was able to pull away in the second half, led by senior running back Joe Gobble, brother of Division I Offensive Player of the Year last year, Jason Gobble. He had 182 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns to go along with 96 receiving yards. With the win, Stowe is 1-0, and they will host 0-1 Kent Roosevelt, while Green will travel to 0-1 Warren Howland. As my esteemed colleague from the Suburban League already mentioned, Cuyahoga Falls wasted no time in avenging for their 0-10 season last year by defeating the aforementioned Kent Roosevelt Rough Riders 13-0 in a cross-division Suburban League contest. Cuyahoga Falls did score 13 points in the fourth quarter, and with the win, they are 1-0 and will entertain 1-0 Akron Garfield, while Kent Roosevelt will unfortunately play the 1-0 Stowe Bulldogs. The Hudson Explorers, they rode their defense to an opening night 17-7 home victory against the Austintown Fitch Falcons. The Explorers' defense actually pitched a shutout, as Fitch's only score came on a 33-yard interception return for a touchdown by Jason Johns in the first quarter. Hudson's Kevin Callahan scored from 5 yards out to tie the game. The D got a measure of revenge as Hudson defensive back Evan Westerbeck picked off a pass from Fitch's Nate Fowler to set up a 10-yard touchdown run by quarterback Jackson Parker. Explorers kicker Grant Gagne finished the scoring out with a 41-yard field goal to seal the game. Hudson will travel to 0-1 Strawnsville, while Austintown Fitch will host the 1-0 Brunswick Blue Devils. Another game that was already covered today, I will provide the other side of spin to it. The North Royalton Bears travel to North Ridgeville, a once-annual meeting when both teams were part of the now-defunct Pioneer Conference. The Bears took control early, leading 10-0 after the first quarter on a Jake Franzik 7-yard run and a 30-yard field goal by James Osborne. North Ridgeville rallied to take a 14-10 lead before North Royalton scored to lead 17-14 at the half on quarterback Joe Marusik's 1-yard touchdown run. In the second half, the Rangers just could not hang with the Bears as North Royalton scored 21 points to the Rangers' 6, completing the 38-20 victory. The Bears' Jake Franzik scored from 2 yards and 80 yards out for a total of 3 rushing touchdowns. Quarterback Joe Marusik connected on a 30-yard touchdown pass to David Stewart. North Royalton will host 0-1 Parma. North Royalton will begin Southwestern Conference play against 0-1 Amherst Steel. And once again, in another cross-division matchup, Twinsburg hosted Copley. Copley jumped out on the Tigers quick. The aforementioned Weston Bridges bookended touchdown runs of 40 and 9 yards with an Austin Brenner 14-yard touchdown run. Twinsburg did pull it to within 28-21 at the end of the third quarter as Jalen Tucker threw 3 touchdowns, 2 of which to Christian Edgerson of 18 and 83 yards, and a 38-yard touchdown to Trey Radford. The Indians' Western Bridges did put the game out of reach with his 4th touchdown run of the game in the final quarter, not before Edgerson ran back the ensuing kickoff for a 90-yard touchdown run to account for the final 35-28 score. Twinsburg will travel to 1-0 Solon. Copley hosts 0-1 Firestone. Last but certainly not least, my game of the week, Macedonia-Nordonia taking on the Mayfield Wildcats. They picked right up where they left off in the 2015 season, and they delivered a barn burner. The teams combined for 75 points, a celebration for the offensive staffs, and a migraine for the defense. Ironically, the first points of the game came from a defensive score as Ty Evans returned to fumble 62 yards from Nordonia to put the Knights up early. Mayfield answered with a 67-yard touchdown run by Michael Canganelli. Our old buddy from last year, Anthony Perrine, punched it in from 10 yards for Nordonia, only to have the Wildcats counter with 2 more touchdowns. Quarterback Jake Dostal hit wide receiver Julian Hicks for a 72-yard score, and then Dostal then followed that up with a 5-yard touchdown run. Nordonia closed the scoring on a 55-yard touchdown run by Perrine, wrapping up the first quarter at 21-21. The teams accounted for almost 350 yards in just the first quarter alone. Goodness gracious.
Wow.
Yeah, defense was clearly optional in this game in the first quarter. The scoring did slow down after the first, with Mayfield taking a 28-21 lead into the half. Andrew Curl connected on the 20-yard field goal to provide the Wildcats with their biggest lead of the night at 31-21. Nordonia then rattled off 17 straight points, thanks to 2 touchdown passes from quarterback Ravi Levick, a 5-yard touchdown pass to Ryan Smith, and a 26-yard touchdown pass to Donnie Wisniak. The touchdowns did sandwich a 38-yard field goal by Trey Crockett. Mayfield was not through. Pinned at their own 4-yard line with less than 3 minutes left to play, the Wildcats marched 96 yards in 2 minutes and 29 seconds, ending with a 30-yard touchdown pass from Dostal to Hicks with 22 seconds left. Unfortunately, and this is the downside of being a kicker sometimes, Andrew Curl's extra point to tie the game was no good, and Nordonia escapes with a 38-37 victory.
Wow, what a game.
In the game, Anthony Perrine led both teams rushing, carrying the ball 34 times for 213 yards and 2 scores to go with 2 receptions for 24 yards. His counterpart on Mayfield, Michael Canganelli, rushed 20 times for 109 yards and a touchdown. Quarterback Jake Dostal counted for 3 touchdowns, 2 through the air and 1 on the ground. Nordonia will travel to Bedford, while Mayfield will host Massillon Jackson.
Excellent
That
work.
is the Suburban League in a nutshell there.
Nice job, guys. I'll tell you what, you guys
Well,
rolled
I
through
mean,
that.
Ed did good. Sean, no, I'm just kidding. I'm
the
kidding.
train wreck from the beginning.
I'm
come
kidding.
on.
I'm kidding.
No, I mean, you look at Nordonia. I mean, is that a team you think is going to put up some big-time points all year round and the defense maybe struggle, or do you think the defense will come around maybe? It's a first game, so.
I think the defense will come around eventually. They play pretty good defense for the most part, and
Yeah.
Evans and Perrine are both returning starters from last year. So it's going to be tough for a team to key on one of those two running backs, or both of them at the same time. I mean, one of them's going to end up breaking loose over the course of a game. So I mean, Nordonia is a very well coached team. And that they beat another very well-coached team in Mayfield. So I mean, I look for big things on Nordonia this year. If you're asking me, I'll say Nordonia, Hudson, and Stowe are probably the class of the National Division right now.
I would agree with that. Looking at my division, one thing that I was very, very surprised with was the play of Revere against Buckeye, and specifically Clayton Langdon. I mean, this guy had 29 carries, 260, almost 300 yards of offense, and 4 touchdowns, including a game winner in overtime on week 1. Revere's not exactly been known as the powerhouse in that division last year at all. I mean, they were in the basement.
0-6, 3-7
But
overall.
If they can get this kind of production from that running back week in and week out, they're going to be a not a fun team to play come when the weather's cold and when you can actually run the ball.
I mean, that's 9 yard per gain average for him. I mean, that's unbelievable.
That's week 1 and against a pretty good Buckeye Bucks defense. I mean, they beat them last year. They had revenge in their mind. They didn't want to lose to Buckeye again. The other thing that impressed me again was how sloppy these games were. I don't know if it was just week 1 stuff, but we can talk about this when we talk about the game of the week. But I just saw so many bonehead penalties, and Ed, as a coach, and as any coach would tell you, the one thing that kills drives, the one thing that kills momentum is stupid mistakes done just because you're not paying attention or because you let your emotion get the best of you. But I saw so many drive-killing penalties and so many just out-of-control penalty yards in these games that it's just amazing to me. I mean, they got to be running sprints today. I mean, if this was me, we're doing bear crawls in full pads. We're doing gassers until you don't jump off sides or you don't hold or you don't do a stupid face mask penalty. Guys, what do you think?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we were talking about this after our JV game. Actually, the Brunswick, our JV team, lost to Highlands JV team 41-21. But a lot of that happened. It's just a lot of things of. A lot of stupid penalties, not knowing where you're lining up. Sometimes you just kind of, you're not running the right play, whatnot. And that kind of comes with the territory in your first game out because you don't, you've been running the same stuff for 3-4 weeks. Yeah, and you do play other teams, but you're not really showing your whole hand. You're running, basic plays and whatnot.
Well, I mean,
once you get in the battle of a game and you understand that what you do. If you get a 5-yard penalty that negates a 15-yard run, that's a 20-yard swing. Yeah. I think the kids seem to the kids now it might take them a minute to kind of figure that out. I was kind of saying that I was kind of thinking about this before. I remember when we were in school, we didn't have to have a 1-game or 2-game butt kicking to understand what we need to do on the JV end. I mean, our JV teams were generally pretty good when we were playing, and we got that pretty early from the start, but. For whatever reason, this I think just not so much from GV, but also from everyone. For a lot of these teams, it's just bringing the rust out, and you don't realize how good you either are or aren't until you actually play a game. And I think the coaches obviously make adjustments, but the kids also got to make an adjustment themselves as far as checking themselves and realizing, okay, what I do, whether I'm not paying attention to practice or whether I'm not watching the ball and I get a stupid false start penalty, it all affects it. It affects everything.
Well, I think, and again, I don't want to just keep coming back to the Brunswick Highland game, but specifically in that game was kind of a microcosm because you saw in the second half, in the fourth quarter, they were Brunswick was really trying to run that clock down because they realized you don't want to give Highland an opportunity with their passing game as effective as it was in that game, to come back and win. And if not for stupid penalties or not knowing where to line up or miscommunication from the sidelines, they were forced to call timeout, which gives a little bit of life to the other side. Not that it really affected it too much, because I just don't. Brunswick had the ability to win that game, but you don't want to give a team like Highland or even in another situation, the close game that you had, Robin, yours, Lorraine and Midview. I mean, we don't know the penalty yards on that, but we had to believe that if you have a team like Midview down, you don't give them an opportunity to come back, because they're good enough to beat you, most days. And if you have the opportunity to get a momentum swing and, there but for a stupid penalty or there but for a bad read or a miscue, now all of a sudden you've woken a sleeping giant and given them an opportunity to beat you. I mean, that's tough for anything.
I think one thing I noticed with Highland is there were a few times the quarterback dropped back, and it was supposed to be a handoff, and there was no running back even there. He was ready to hand it off. He's not there, and then he's pretty much left out to dry. But that's week one. That's kids just not knowing where they're supposed to be at a certain play, or maybe he thought obviously it was something else. It's going to happen week one. You want to get it out. You don't want it to really happen at all, but when it does, you rather it be early on in the season. Going back to Revere and Buckeye, I mean, that game, the one thing that's interesting to me with Revere is, they ran the ball a lot. You look at passing yards. I mean, there were like 69 passing yards from Revere. That, they're going to have to somehow balance that out, because if people are going to start loading the box with 8 guys, maybe that could slow down their rushing game a little bit. Obviously, Buckeye had a tough time, but looking at some statistics for Buckeye, Eric Keller, he passed for 110 yards and a touchdown. They had some different receivers.
He's coming in on spot, did he, too? He's the backup quarterback.
Yeah, I wonder, what happened there. Or it looks like Fauver actually was 7 of 10 for 45 yards, and maybe something happened with him. But when you look at the receivers, Jonathan Neal, he had 81 yards and a touchdown. Then Ricky Van Boxel had 41 for receiving wise. And then you look at rushing for them, 110 yards by Justin Kennedy there. And then there was actually Michael Dorge had 80 yards. And, I mean, they were high averages, 10 yards per gain for Kennedy and a touchdown. And then Dorge had 2 touchdowns and a 7.3 average. And then even Adam Fauver, the quarterback, he rushed for 39 yards, a 5.6 average. So that's what I think is impressive with Buckeye. They can pass a little bit when they need to, but they can also have a pretty strong rushing attack. Now the defense is going to have to figure that out. And I think they will eventually when Coach Benzoni will look at the tape, and I think Buckeye will come back strong again, because they're just one of those teams that learns from their mistakes, and they don't make them too often. But in this game, a high-scoring overtime game, it is pretty impressive, though. I was impressed with Revere. I mean, 261 yards by Langdon for Revere.
One of the things that I noticed when I was looking at the stories that came out of the Buckeye Revere game was, what I didn't know and what was shocking to me was a lot of the Buckeye team is young, super young. I mean, their first game, varsity level, for a lot of these kids was an overtime game, and you don't get that a lot with game one. You know what I mean? So it's impressive that they were able to hang in there, because for any young team, you know what I mean. The Friday night lights can be pretty awesome, but also pretty scary for some. And they hung in there against a pretty seasoned Revere team. That running back has had a great night. You know what I mean? And like you mentioned, 69 yards of passing. Well, if you're getting it done on the ground like that, why if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know what I mean? Keep handing them the ball till they stop it.
Yep.
And talking about sloppy play, I think you may have hit the nail right on the head, too. A lot of these younger teams who got a lot of younger players on the team, first experience of Friday Night Lights, that's where a lot of mistakes happen. Inexperience. We all know throughout a course of life, if you're inexperienced, you make mistakes. And sometimes the moment is just a little too big. So that could be a reason why we saw some of the poor play out of some of these teams. But, hey, nobody's perfect. All these teams that we're talking about tonight will eventually turn it around and get it going. And, well, some teams have to, coming off with a loss week one. But some teams will have to continue to be successful in the things that they were doing successfully, and hopefully get victory number 2 this week.
Hey, Duff, would you what is your game of the week this week?
My game of the week is Aurora at Euclid, and this is a big game because Aurora, after coming off a pretty bad loss to Solon, needs to right the ship. And unfortunately, again, as I said in my recap, it doesn't get any easier when you have to go to Euclid.
Yeah, but the thing that Aurora has with it is Euclid is I mentioned it earlier, Euclid is a young team, and they had a really, really good victory against Glenville in week 1.
Right.
Now, you don't know necessarily how a young team's going to respond. They're either going to respond and continue to play well and build on what they did, or maybe think too much of themselves, take a step back. So they're coached really well. Coach Roski, we all know him. Very good coach, very enthusiastic coach. He'll have them ready to play.
Yeah.
So, yes, it will be a tough game for Aurora, but it's not.
Oh, it's not insurmountable. I just think coupled with the fact that they let Solon run up and down the field on them. They shot themselves in the foot week 1, and Coach Milhack will also said that in that as much in an interview. You can't turn the ball over against a good team. You can't shoot yourself in the foot. You can't stop drives. And I think the Aurora coaching staff realizes, and maybe that it took a beating by Solon to give them their kids a wake-up call, like, hey, you're not going to cruise in the Suburban League. You're not going to cruise to whatever. You're going to have to fight for every inch you got. So I look for this game as kind of hopefully Aurora, can galvanize from the loss and respond and right the ship against Euclid, moving on to finish out non-conference play and then going into conference play because, with the Copleys out there, with the Highlands out there playing, starting to play well. And now we don't know what Revere is. If they can continue to run the ball like this, now all of a sudden it's not such a cakewalk for Aurora.